Bronwyn Newport never expected her world to change so quickly. But Season 6 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City revealed one of the most emotional turning points of her entire life. It wasn't a reunion fight. It wasn't a shocking secret. It wasn't a dramatic cast meltdown. It was something far more real than any storyline could prepare her for. Her daughter Gwen was ready to spread her wings, and Bronwyn was nowhere near ready to watch her fly away. What should have been an exciting milestone suddenly felt like a quiet heartbreak brewing under the surface. And that's exactly where this story begins. Before we continue, impress the like button and subscribe to this channel because this emotional journey deserves your full attention. During a simple bonsai tree outing, Bronwyn, Gwen, and Muzzy found themselves cutting branches and shaping tiny trees, a peaceful activity that quickly turned into a moment of raw truth. Gwen mentioned something innocent enough at first, wanting to find a companion for her pet chameleon. But then she said the word that shifted Bronwyn's entire emotional foundation. Portland. Not Salt Lake City. Not home. Not the place where Bronwyn could keep an eye on her. Gwen casually explained why, describing Portland as a cool place and reminding her mom that she too once wanted to explore the world, to break out of expectations, to live a life bigger than the one she knew. She spoke with honesty, not rebellion. She said she wanted a new experience, a place where she could grow and learn and figure out who she truly was. To Gwen, moving out wasn't rejection, it was independence. But for Bronwyn, it felt like the beginning of being left behind. In her confessional, Bronwyn opened up about something she had kept tightly guarded for years. She had never been alone. Not really. She went straight from her parents' house to a brief college stint, and then immediately into motherhood with Gwen. As Gwen trimmed her bonsai tree, carefully shaping each branch, Bronwyn felt a symbolic weight she couldn't shake. Her daughter was shaping her own life, choosing her own direction, and Bronwyn couldn't guide her hands anymore. She admitted that Gwen believed her best days were ahead of her, while Bronwyn believed her best days had been spent raising Gwen. That hit her harder than she expected. She wanted Gwen to explore, to dream, to experience everything life could offer. But she also feared being forgotten, being unnecessary, being alone in moments that used to be shared. The moment escalated when Muzzy, still recovering from emergency brain tumor surgery and currently living with Bronwyn and Todd, revealed she too planned to move out. Not immediately, but soon enough that the reality shook Bronwyn to her core. She tried to laugh it off, joking that Todd could be removed if he bothered Muzzy. But the humor collapsed the second she admitted how unfair it felt that both Gwen and Muzzy were planning to leave her life at the same time, deserting her, as she put it, though she knew those words weren't fair. Gwen reassured her, saying no one hated her. Muzzy added that she didn't want to leave either, but emotional logic isn't the same as real logic. Bronwyn wasn't processing facts. She was processing fear. Behind the scenes, Bronwyn revealed the depth of her emotional investment. She spoke about how much she sacrificed during Muzzy's recovery, how deeply involved she was in supporting her parents through their difficult times, how she gave pieces of herself constantly without ever stopping to refill what she'd lost. She felt she and her mother had just settled into a good rhythm again, sharing laughs, rebuilding their bond, finally reaching a peaceful place after years of complicated family dynamics. Losing that stability, losing the daily presence of someone she had worked so hard to reconnect with, felt like watching freshly built trust slip through her fingers. And then came the revelation that shocked the cast earlier in the season, a moment that explained just how desperately Bronwyn was holding on to Gwen. She admitted that she moved Gwen's boyfriend into their house purely to make Gwen stay longer after graduation. It wasn't about control. It was fear. Deep, overwhelming fear that if Gwen left, Bronwyn would be forced to face a version of life she had never prepared for. She said she worried that if she finally had freedom, the freedom she thought she wanted when she was younger, she would waste it. What if she had all this time, space, and opportunity to create something fabulous, and she didn't? What if she never became the person she hoped she'd be? What if she didn't matter without Gwen? She confessed, "I don't know who I am if I'm not Gwen's mom." And that was the truth she had been avoiding. Bronwyn wasn't just scared of the empty house. She was scared of the empty identity. Her whole life had revolved around Gwen, and raising her became Bronwyn's anchor. Letting go felt like cutting the only connection that kept her grounded. She said her biggest insecurity was believing she hadn't done enough for Gwen yet, hadn't taught her enough, hadn't loved her enough in the right ways. She wanted more time, not because Gwen needed it, but because she did. As the conversation unfolded, you could feel the emotional weight pressing down on Bronwyn in every scene. She wasn't trying to trap Gwen. She wasn't trying to guilt Muzzy. She was finally confronting something most parents hide beneath smiles and supportive words. The painful reality that children grow up, parents grow older, and the center of the family eventually shifts away from the person who once held it all together. Watching Gwen confidently prepare for a new chapter forced Bronwyn to question what her own next chapter would be, a chapter she never imagined writing without Gwen at the heart of it. But growth is never as gentle as we hope it will be. It pushes. It pulls. It forces change through discomfort, fear, and vulnerability. And Bronwyn, for the first time, had to face that growth alone. She wasn't losing her daughter. She wasn't losing her mother. She was losing the version of herself that existed only in service to others. And what she would do next, how she would rebuild, redefine, and rediscover herself, was a journey just beginning. Bronwyn tried to smile through the tension, but everything that once felt familiar suddenly felt unstable. The home that used to echo with Gwen's laughter, her mother's conversations, and the soft hum of family life now felt like it was preparing to empty itself out. Every room represented a chapter that was closing. Every conversation felt like a quiet countdown. And Bronwyn felt herself bracing for a type of silence she had never lived through before. She didn't want to admit it out loud, but she was terrified of becoming a spectator in her own life instead of the person at the center of it. Terrified of losing the constant motion of caretaking that distracted her from her own fears. Terrified that once Gwen left, she would have to face the question she had avoided for 19 years. Who am I without being someone else's anchor? The bonsai moment lingered in her mind long after the outing ended. Watching Gwen trim her tiny tree with steady hands reminded Bronwyn of how much her daughter had grown. Braver, wiser, more independent than she ever expected. Gwen wasn't a child who needed sheltering anymore. She was a young woman who felt the pull of new places, new stories, new beginnings. And deep down, Bronwyn knew this was exactly what good parenting leads to. You teach them to be strong, and then they walk away not because they don't love you, but because they're ready. Yet knowing that didn't make it easier. Bronwyn struggled with the idea that Gwen wasn't choosing to leave her. She was choosing herself. And that was something Bronwyn realized she had never learned to do. What made the situation even more complicated was how much change was happening at once. Muzzy's decision to move out lingered like a second goodbye waiting to happen. For months, Bronwyn had been the emotional backbone of the household, guiding her mother through recovery, navigating family history, and helping mend bonds that had frayed long before cameras ever entered their lives. The rhythm they had finally settled into felt precious, almost fragile. And now that stability, the connection she worked so hard to repair, was slipping away at the same moment Gwen was preparing to go. It wasn't just one loss, it was two, a double shift, a double empty space, a double silence. Bronwyn felt herself pulled in two directions, wanting to support the women she loved as they stepped into their next chapters, while also wishing time would freeze, even just a little, so she wouldn't be forced to face the next chapter of her own before she was ready. She kept telling herself she should be proud, she should be hopeful, she should be cheering them on. And she was. But pride doesn't erase fear. Love doesn't erase loneliness. And support doesn't erase the quiet ache of feeling like the center of your world is drifting away without you. For Gwen, the move was freedom, a chance to create a life on her own terms. She saw Portland as possibility, a clean slate full of color and energy and potential. But for Bronwyn, Portland wasn't just a city. It was a distance she couldn't fill with quick hugs or late-night talks or the comfort of hearing footsteps in the hallway. It was the symbol of a new phase in Gwen's life, one that didn't naturally include her, one where Bronwyn would have to wait to be invited in instead of automatically being part of the story. The more Bronwyn talked about her fears, the more it became clear that her identity was built on caregiving. She wasn't just Gwen's mom. She was Muzzy's support system. She was the one who stepped in when family issues surfaced. She was the one who always tried to keep the emotional weight balanced so no one else had to carry it. She had been so busy holding everyone else up that she never stopped to look at the foundation beneath her own feet. And now that everyone was moving forward, she had no choice but to face the cracks she had ignored. The confession about moving Gwen's boyfriend into the house replayed in her mind. She remembered the awkward laughs from the cast, the disbelief, the judgment, the teasing, but none of them understood what she felt in that moment. It wasn't manipulation. It was fear wearing desperation like armor. She wanted Gwen to stay because she wasn't ready to face the quiet that would come after she left. She wasn't ready to face mornings where she didn't need to check in on anyone, evenings where she didn't hear Gwen's music through the wall, days where no one depended on her to be the emotional glue. She didn't know how to exist without that role. Bronwyn's fear wasn't about parenting. It was about purpose. She felt like her purpose was tied to caretaking, and if the people she cared for no longer needed her, what was she supposed to do next? The questions haunted her. What if she didn't know how to build a fabulous life for herself? What if she didn't know how to fill her days with things that belonged only to her? What if she wasn't interesting without being responsible for someone else? That fear carved into her deeper than she wanted to admit. But something else was happening beneath the surface. Something Bronwyn couldn't see yet. Gwen wasn't abandoning her. Muzzy wasn't abandoning her. They weren't moving away from her. They were moving toward themselves. And in that shift, Bronwyn was being pushed toward a chapter she had avoided for 19 years. A chapter about her. A chapter where she would have to rediscover the pieces of herself she buried under responsibilities, expectations, and fears. Bronwyn stood at the edge of a life she didn't plan for, one that felt unfamiliar and intimidating. She wasn't sure how to step into it. She wasn't sure who she would become without the daily role of mother, caretaker, fixer, protector. But maybe, just maybe, the next chapter wasn't about losing her purpose but redefining it. Maybe the silence she feared wasn't emptiness but space. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to become someone she had never allowed herself to be.